Thanks, Andrew, and good evening. Tonight, there are calls for Commissioner Virginia Bell to apologise after she allowed pro-Palestinian groups to interrogate a Jewish leader at the Anti-Semitism Royal Commission. But Albanese's hand-picked commissioner is not backing down. And today, she launched an extraordinary defence of her decision to give Palestinian groups leave to cross-examine David Ossip for an hour about the actions of Israel, Palestinian casualty figures, its military operations. I mean, all areas that have nothing to do with Australian Jews. The move has angered the community and even Premier Chris Minns. Minns told me exclusively earlier today that he was disappointed. He said David Ossip showed real courage in coming forward to give evidence about anti-Semitism in Australia and the impact on the Jewish community. The idea that the focus shifted from anti-Semitism in Australia to testing a witness on foreign policy by the lawyers representing the Palestine Action Group and the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network is disappointing and doesn't reflect the purpose of these hearings. Well, good on the Premier for being consistently strong and courageous and for being unafraid to call out those disgraceful scenes at the Royal Commission. Federal Labor MP Josh Burns, who's mates with Albanese, was also unimpressed. And here's what he told the ABC today.
And I think he made the good point, which is, regardless of what people's views might be around incidents in the Middle East, actually what we're talking about is the experiences of Australians and fellow Australians and Jewish Australians, and that isn't the same thing.
This criticism stretched across both sides of politics, and Liberal Senator James Patterson called on the Royal Commission to apologise to Ossip. He said the Royal Commission is supposed to combat anti-Semitism, not facilitate it. Cross-examining an Australian Jew about the actions of the Israeli government is an abuse of the process. It should not happen again, and David Ossip deserves an apology. But there was no apology from Virginia Bell today. Instead, she snappily defended her decision to allow Palestinian activist groups to grill Ossip about matters that had absolutely nothing to do with him, about the so-called context for the Hamas slaughter of innocent families, about Palestinian casualty figures, about a biased United Nations report, and even comments made by Benjamin Netanyahu. And just a reminder, these were some of those questions that Ossip was forced to sit there and field.
And you appreciate and understand, don't you, Mr. Ossip, that Palestinians, both in the occupied territory and here in Australia, have also suffered deep psychological trauma? And the context in relation to the events of 7 October 2023 are firstly that in the period between 2008 and 2023, 7 October 2023, roughly 6,600 Palestinians had been killed by the Israeli security forces. That's the context, is it not?
You are aware, aren't you, that Israel Defence Force fighter jets began conducting airstrikes in the Gaza Strip at around 5:30 p.m. Sydney time on the 7th of October. I want to suggest to you that you have seen nothing that has emanated from the organisers of the rally, namely the Palestine Action Group, which would suggest in any way that the rally was being convened to celebrate those despicable attacks.
Well, David Ossip said very clearly that he wasn't equipped to answer these questions, and he even tried to stop the line of questioning at the start of that interrogation, but the Commissioner allowed it.
I think, and I'm happy to address that again, but I think this line of questioning is very instructive.
Mr. Ossip, if the line of questioning falls outside matters that are properly before me, I will rule the question inadmissible. I have not made that ruling.
And the questions went on from both lawyers for about an hour. So how could Virginia Bell possibly defend this when the New South Wales Premier can see it's wrong, when James Patterson can see it's wrong, when anyone with common sense could see that it was, well, even cruel to ask Ossip, an Australian, to account for alleged actions of Israel? But Bell described it today, when she was defending her actions, as procedural fairness.
Ms Mather's cross-examination proceeded based upon a limited grant of leave. The leave was limited to paragraph 51 of the statement of Mr Ossip. In that paragraph, Mr Ossip expressed his opinion about the conduct of the State of Israel in the period immediately following the attack by the terrorist group Hamas on Israel. Ms Mather sought on behalf of her client to put matters that challenged the factual basis for the formation of that aspect of Mr Ossip's opinion. She was granted leave to do that because procedural fairness, a concept familiar to lawyers but perhaps not more widely understood, demanded it.
Kind of patronising there. Well, that statement that you referred to, paragraph 51 of David Ossip's statement, well, it made the point that the Opera House protest occurred before Israel's military response in Gaza had begun. So because of that one line, he was subject to almost an hour of interrogation by lawyers acting for the two Palestinian groups. Now, the Commissioner Virginia Bell today also seemed to blame Jewish leader Alex Rivchin for abusive emails that one of the lawyers, Ragni Mathur, had received afterwards.
The solicitors assisting the Commission received an email communication today from the solicitors for the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network, APAN. That attached a copy of a newspaper report of an interview with a prominent member of the Jewish community who expressed the opinion in that interview that counsel appearing for APAN and for the Palestine Advocacy Group had endeavoured to hijack the Royal Commission. Following the publication of that interview, I am informed that Ms Mather of Senior Counsel, who appeared yesterday for APAN, received a series of truly abusive Islamophobic emails.
Now, Alex was among the many people who criticised the cross-examination. He was not alone. This singling out of Alex was unfair, and he was right to criticise the cross-examination by the Palestinian groups, just as the Premier has now done, and as the late Matilda's father, Michael Britfin, did yesterday as well. The Commissioner certainly shouldn't be blaming Alex for any abuse the lawyer may have received. And here's what Michael said. This is the father of the 10-year-old, the youngest victim of the Bondi attack, Matilda B. And Michael said he couldn't understand why the Commission allowed the protest groups, via their lawyers, to cross-examine witnesses. He said, what I struggle to understand is why they were allowed to be there in the first place, let alone use the Royal Commission to ask questions that shift the focus away from the anti-Semitism that led to it. And of course, he's following these proceedings closely because the reason we have a Royal Commission is because of the deaths of the 15 innocent people at Bondi. But this entire saga, in my view, has been revealing about the Royal Commission. And to borrow Chris Minz's phrase, it's been revealing in a disappointing way. Because they don't seem to grasp why the Opera House protests and the many others like it was so problematic. Now, listen to this question from the Commissioner to David Ossip right at the end of his testimony.
The thing that made the 9th of October 2023 protest particularly difficult from your perspective was that you, and as you understood it, all the members of, or almost all the members of the Jewish community were in a state of very considerable distress by reason of the fact that events were still unfolding inside Israel involving people being kidnapped and harmed. And it was in the context of that very heated atmosphere that you had the lively concerns about security for the Jewish community if they were to come into contact with the protesters. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Now, yes, the timing was insensitive, of course, but that's hardly the main issue. The key issue is the despicable display of hatred, the waving of terror flags that then continued at most of the protests, including the Harbour Bridge March, plus the clearly anti-Semitic chants like this.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews?
Commissioner Virginia Bell also seemed to believe that the Palestine Action Group had condemned that anti-Semitic behaviour. Look at this.
You were shown a document which I think might be MFI2. It was the Facebook post, apparently on the social media page of the Palestine Action Group, in which the group distanced itself from the anti-Semitic chants that had taken place at the forecourt of the Opera House. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And am I right in thinking you said, at least insofar as the post did that, you welcomed it?
Of course, without any question.
Yes.
Now, I'm really worried that the Commissioner may genuinely believe the Palestine Action Group had condemned the anti-Semitism of the Opera House rally, because while their leaders and organisers may not have chanted F the Jews, they were clearly supporting the Hamas terror organisation just 48 hours after it burned, raped, kidnapped and killed civilians. And here's two speakers from the Palestine Action Group on the night of the Opera House rally.
So to anyone who comes out with an argument that says Hamas is a terrorist organisation, let me tell you that it is internationally recognised that we Palestinians as Hamas have a right to resist.
I will say it loud, loud as I can. Hamas practices anti-colonialism. Please use the word Sahina, not the word Yahoo.
And we're on the side of the Palestinians, not just when they're the victims and being massacred. We're also on the side of the Palestinians when they fight back.
I mean, the Commissioner needs to see this evidence. And David Ossip would have had it before him, but he was given virtually no notice that the Palestinian groups would be cross-examining him. He thought he was there to give straightforward testimony about how police advised the Jewish community to stay out of Sydney's CBD that night. And then shortly before his appearance, he was told that two Palestinian groups had been given leave by the Royal Commission to cross-examine him. This was an ambush. If this was going to happen, he should have had time to prepare for the questions. But the bottom line is that Virginia Bell was wrong to allow an Australian Jew to be accosted by lawyers representing the very activists who had organised the shameful rally under scrutiny. Chris Minns knows it, Josh Burns knows it, so does James Patterson. and his right to demand an apology for allowing the proceedings to become a platform for bad actors to intimidate a witness with propaganda intended to excuse and sanitise the disgrace of the Opera House rally. Now, former radio titan, and by the way, I'm going to come back to that with Dave Sharma in just a moment. But now former radio titan Alan Jones has sat through day 3 of his bombshell trial, where so far graphic allegations of sexual assault have been heard in court. And today the young athlete, known only as Jay, continued his cross-examination. Judge Glenn Walsh issued a non-publication order on one specific line of questioning from Jones's lawyer. More on this thanks to 9 News.
Due to this non-publication order on today's proceedings, we can't tell you much about what happened in court, but there was some action outside this afternoon. However, as Jones left for the day, the veteran broadcaster heckled by a member of the public who yelled profanities at Jones as he made his way through the media pack to his waiting limousine. Now, inside the court today at cross-examination of complainant Jay, it was slow, methodical and at times painstaking. Everything you'd expect from Jones's legal team is they questioned this man who Jones allegedly abused as a teenage athlete in the early 2000s. It will be up to Judge Glenn Walsh to lift that non-publication order at the end of the cross-examination, which will continue tomorrow.
And Alan Jones denies all the allegations. OK, let's bring in now Shadow Assistant Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs, Dave Sharma. Dave, great to see you again.
Good evening, Sharri.
Now, you've just watched me speak about what happened with David Ossip. What do you think of the Commissioner's defence that this was simply procedural fairness?
What I don't understand is the Palestine Action Group were the organisers of these 9th of October protests. They should be in the dock answering the questions. They shouldn't be asking the questions. It was those protests that opened a window, a torrent of anti-Semitism in Australia, which we have struggled to contain ever since. They were the fuel, they were the fire that, you know, kick-started everything we've had to endure, the Jewish community has had to endure the past 2.5 years. How they were given the right to cross-examine David Ossip, not about the experience of the Australian Jewish community, not about the events at the Opera House that night, but about the conduct of a foreign state for whom he has no responsibility and for whom he is not the spokesperson. I just find that entirely bizarre, and I don't find the explanations for it convincing. Apparently, it was one paragraph in his statement. Why were they entitled to cross-examine him for an hour?
Exactly, absolutely. And the questioning went on and went on about casualty figures and a United Nations report. I mean, he wasn't in a position to answer that. I mean, I totally agree with you. An excellent point that they should have been the ones in the dock answering the questions, not the ones asking them. But if she wanted procedural fairness, then have them give their own testimony. They shouldn't have been grilling David Ossip.
I agree. I mean, if procedural fairness requires them to give their own version of events, then they could have appeared as witnesses and been asked questions by Commission lawyers. But why they were entitled to the right to what, to all intents and purposes, looks like a cross-examination of David Ossip, it looks to me like an abusive process. It looks like the Royal Commission was hijacked to make the subject of the investigation not about anti-Semitism in Australia, but about a war that's happening overseas and in which we exercise no control as Australians.
And I understand Josh Lees was in the audience watching on, by the way. I want to move to another couple of topics, but just very quickly on that point, why aren't politicians appearing this week? Shouldn't the Prime Minister have to answer for why he didn't show stronger leadership in the wake of the Opera House rally? Because, as you say, that's when this sort of aggression became normalised.
I quite agree. I've been surprised that more people in government haven't been called before the Royal Commission, not just public servants or people in uniform or police officers, but people who took decisions about how Australia would respond to this outbreak and anti-Semitism. And it was clear that the Labor government, the federal Labor government, has a lot to answer for here. Thus far, though, their conduct seems to have escaped any scrutiny. The PM should be called. Tony Burke should be called. Absolutely. All right, let's get to a couple of other topics. Now, Tony Burke is reportedly deprioritising overseas skilled workers
as part of this push to cut down on migration. Now, it seems like he's reacting to One Nation, but if you're going to cut down on migrants, surely the skilled cohort is the one that you'd leave.
Well, absolutely. We are so short of skilled workers, especially in construction. If you want to know why houses cost so much to build, if you want to know why it's taking so long to build, it's because of a shortage of skilled workers. You know, people who are, massage therapists and catering and hospitality in the skilled migration stream, they get a higher priority. Yeah. I have to say, though, I mean, overall, Labor's policy here seems completely in disarray. Tony Burke was due to address the National Press Club tomorrow. That appearance has now been cancelled because seemingly the Labor government cannot agree on how they deal with migration. And it's clear they don't have control of the migration program. They don't have a strategy for it. And this is just yet another example. Yeah, it seems like there's a crisis in Cabinet. I'll come back to that with my panel a bit later. Now, the Prime Minister's been criticised for snubbing an important diplomatic dinner that celebrates Japan's relationship with Australia. And instead, he was seen schmoozing with singer Amy Shark at a Spotify music event, as you can see on the screen. Now, many other ministers went. John Howard, Matt Canavan all managed to make it to the Japanese event. I mean, he should have prioritised that, surely. I don't see why he couldn't have made an appearance there. He was clearly in Parliament that night. He wasn't off-site. Sure, if he wants to stop by the Spotify event and say hello to Amy Shark and get a selfie, go right ahead, but he should have been at that dinner. This is the 50th anniversary of a relationship with one of our most important, long-standing and valuable trade, commercial, strategic and defence partners. That relationship matters. And, of course, it comes on the back of a pretty gratuitous insult he levelled at Japan's Prime Minister not long ago. Exactly. So the Japanese Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, visited. She brought Albanese a ceremonial melon, and he then went and made this tasteless and sexist gag about it on a podcast. Let's have a look.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon.
Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting...
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
She brought two.
Yes, really.
And they're beautiful.
It's so inappropriate, so offensive. And, I mean, you're a former diplomat, Dave. I mean, how would that go down with Sanae Takaichi? It's gone down terribly with Japan. I mean, Japan is too dignified and polite a nation to make their anger known publicly. This is one of the highest order diplomatic insults you could give. The gift was a genuine and valuable gift, which has a high status in Japanese society. And here's the Prime Minister of Australia, the leader of our country, our chief diplomat, making fun of a foreign leader, making lewd and sexist remarks about a female foreign leader of one of our closest and most dependable partners. I can't overstate what a diplomatic blunder this is. This is of nuclear proportions. And you think how hard they went against Scott Morrison for genuinely confected they claimed he had these women problem. He had no women problem, and yet the Prime Minister gets away with jokes like this and no one says a word. Oh, absolutely. And you would know in the same podcast, he apologised for one element of this podcast saying, I'm not even going to repeat it because it's too disgusting for open air, but he's already apologised for one sexist element of the podcast. Why hasn't he apologised for this, and why has no apology been given to Japan? Yeah. Very quickly, Dave, where it's reported tonight exclusively in The Australian that two Iranian footballers who, you'll remember, they didn't sing the Iranian national anthem when they were here for the Asian Cup, they have now officially become Australian citizens. Well, that is one good move. That is a piece of good news, and I'm glad we've given them a home. Wonderful. All right, Dave, great to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, and let's turn to Tony Burke now because, as Dave just said, he did pull the pin on a major migration speech which was supposed to go ahead tomorrow at the Press Club. Now, a spokesman says that some elements wouldn't be finalised by Thursday, but behind the scenes there's said to be cabinet angst and internal division over changes to the migration policy. And for more, let's bring in News24 contributor Joe Hildebrand.
Good night, Sharri.
And former John Howard advisor David Gazard. Great to see you both. Now, Joe, is this Labor panicking over the rise of One Nation and different factions not agreeing on whether or not they should lower the migration level?
I think it's Labor probably not panicking enough. I would have thought that Tony Burke, who carries the can on every criticism of Australia's migration intake, would be smart enough, and I think he is smart enough, he's an intelligent man, to know that there needs to be a big reset in this area if Labor is to regain ground from One Nation and stop, most importantly, this and stem the flow of blue-collar workers from Labor to One Nation, which is now the most popular political party among blue-collar workers. Labor has to get those voters back. Tony Burke is smart enough to know this, and so what I suspect has happened is that he has developed a policy that does, and we've seen, elements of that sort of be leaked, for example, favouring people. And I don't think it is actually, stamping out skilled migration, but rather giving preference to migrants who are already onshore over those overseas in those categories. But he's smart enough to know that that's what has to happen. And I suspect that perhaps the left-wing dominated cabinet is just catching up on that blindingly obvious fact.
Well, I mean, Dave, the reality is Albanese, for most of his time as Prime Minister since 2022, has run a big Australia agenda. He never told the election that this is what he was going to do, but it's record highs.
What this shows really is how any of these sort of speeches for policy on immigration are just a lightning rod for angst within the ministry, within the caucus, and now in cabinet. In my time working in politics, go back to John Howard's time with the Tampa, with Stop the Boats. On all these policies over sort of 7 or 8 election cycles, there has been dissent within the Labor Party, particularly among the left, over the extent and the size, the quantum of people who should be allowed to come here, whether or not they're brought by people smugglers or whether they're coming in under the vastly expanded immigration program run by this government. So it surprises me not one whit that Burke takes his policy to the cabinet and is howled down with those in the left who want to have an expansive program, which is causing, as Joe has just noted, a flee of voters who are sick and tired of some of the policy ramifications or the practical ramifications of this policy.
I mean, you bring up some of those policies and comments that former Prime Minister John Howard made, and he was really able to connect and cut through to voters. I mean, even with similar, I think the coalition has pretty similar figures or similar policy to One Nation, but, Pauline's really cutting through with her policy at the moment, and they're not. All right, let's turn to Chris Bowen at the Press Club today, and he tried to spin the fact that Labor was failing to make its 82% renewable target by 2030. Have a look.
We are making very good progress on many elements of our transition. There's others where we're facing headwinds, which we've always been frank about. We've faced the international circumstances of now 2 global energy shocks in our 4 years. If you ask the question, is it on me? Yes, that's my job. I'm not famous for walking away from my responsibilities. I run into them, embrace them, and do my best to deliver on them.
Yeah, so Joe, it is on him, and he has failed.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess we'll know by 2035 and 2050, but I think it's certainly the targets are heroic. I don't think anyone really, much like the housing targets, seriously thinks that we're going to get there. It's just something to aspire to and work towards and sort of remind us, I guess, what we're supposed to be doing. I don't mind the solar discounts for business at all, or the increasing of the threshold to more powerful or higher capacity solar panels. I think, in fact, this is the solution. I've certainly privately and I think publicly advocated for solar panels as one of Australia's great climate success stories. The take-up has far exceeded anything that was expected, and the cost has plummeted compared to what the projections were. So I think, again, don't pick winners. Just look at what the market is picking as a winner and say, yes, if we can extract every last bit of electricity from solar and do it in a way that helps businesses instead of imposing more problems on them, then that's fantastic.
But Joe, I mean, solar panels are all well and good, but David, the issue is that Chris Bowen's handling of this, so-called energy transition has been a disaster. It's directly caused families an enormous cost on their power prices.
Yeah, it has. I mean, the one thing I'm with Joe a little bit on this, in that there is available rooftop for business, and there are some very innovative programs that are coming out of the business community, out of transmission and generation companies that do rely on city areas to generate electricity. So the one thing you can say for it is it doesn't rely on thousands of kilometres of transmission lines and huge solar and wind plants in regional areas where there's disquiet about the size of those programs on agricultural land, but also the way transmission cuts across valuable land. So the one area we can have a debate about is whether or not the government needs to subsidise with taxpayer money more and more solar for what very much looks like the private sector would fund on its own.
I don't know, I think if you ask most people, they would say that this entire energy program that Chris Bowen has run has been an utter disaster. I mean, we can't even count how many billions of dollars have been wasted with nothing to show for it except for higher energy bills. Now, I want to get to just two more topics before we go. Firstly, I mean, we don't want the judicial system politicised, but Pauline Hanson has put forward this idea of getting rid of Victoria's, what she called them, bleeding heart judges, and making them accountable for the weak sentences they hand down. Have a listen.
So if the sentence handed down by that judge is not in line with the public believe in, then they can be called before the board, be made accountable, and you're going to be put up to losing your job.
I mean, Joe, as I said, we don't want to politicise the judicial system, but it is hard to disagree with this given how many criminals and even terrorist supporters are either let out on bail or given light sentences, and this is particularly acute in Victoria.
Yeah, look, I think you can obviously be very frustrated at some of the sentences handed down, again, especially in Victoria, and we've seen some sort of slips even with members of the judiciary sort of pretending there wasn't even a crime problem in Victoria, quite famously, and politicising themselves. But again, the separation of powers in Australia, as much of a convention as it may be, is just so vital to the health of our democracy and such an incredible immune defence system against corruption that you simply, I don't think, can't afford to even dip your toe in the water with this sort of stuff. And I think it shows, maybe some of Pauline Hanson's political naivety. I mean, the idea that judges, I mean, there's already a capacity to remove judges by the parliament if their overall performance is called into question.
But no one ever does it, though. I mean, this never happens.
It is difficult to. Well, that's right, because it's meant to have to meet a really high threshold. It's meant to be beyond doubt that the judge has been incapacitated, and that's why I think it usually takes a two-thirds majority of parliament. But the idea that you would have a board that would call judges before it just because the community didn't like a decision. I mean, there are plenty of decisions by judges that I don't like and that I disagree with, but that doesn't mean I think that you could possibly have a politicised board that basically says, if you don't do this, then we'll sack you, and particularly without having necessarily seen all the evidence.
OK, we've got to go. We're out of time. Joe Hildebrand, David Gazard, thank you both very much. And still to come, how far will the property market fall and could it crash? Plus the political journalist who has a warning about Pauline Hanson. He'll be here next. Welcome back. Well, with One Nation's rise, discussion about forming an alliance with the coalition in order to win government is consuming the Liberals, and it threatens to divide the party. But the Australian's editor-at-large, Paul Kelly, has today warned that any Liberal national coalition that included Hanson would have a short shelf life. The chaos and crisis on the centre-right would be far worse than it would be if they were governing. And Paul joins me now. Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Good to be with you.
Now, what are your main concerns about a governing alliance if it would happen with both the Conservative parties, with the coalition and with One Nation?
Well, the main point I want to make, Sharri, is that if the coalition, if the Liberal Party has more seats than One Nation after the next election, and Labor can't govern, Labor's in a minority, then the Liberals do not have to form a coalition with One Nation. They don't have to do that. In that situation, the Liberals are in a strong position, and One Nation has got to decide whether it will support the coalition, the Liberal Party, to form a government in terms of supply and confidence, or whether it'll support Labor. Now, the idea that Pauline Hanson would king-make Anthony Albanese into a third term is obviously ludicrous. So the point is this. If Angus Taylor is the leader of the Liberal Party in that situation, he does not have to enter a coalition government with One Nation. He doesn't need to do that. All he needs is One Nation to agree to support a coalition government on the question of supply and confidence.
So that's if the Liberals have more seats than One Nation?
Correct.
Well, I mean, that comes down to the numbers, of course, but One Nation would be looking to pick up, how many from the Nationals? I mean, it could be as many as 10, couldn't it?
Well, this goes to the other fundamental question about politics at the moment, which a lot of people don't seem to understand. I mean, we've got now an epic power struggle on the centre-right of politics between the Liberal Party and the Coalition on one hand and One Nation on the other. And this election is going to determine not just whether Anthony Albanese continues to govern, this election is going to determine which party is the dominant party on the centre-right of politics. And so far, what's happened with Hanson is she is stealing and taking votes from the Liberal Party. At the moment, the polls show that Hanson's One Nation is running ahead of the Liberals and the Coalition as the dominant party on the centre-right. Now, if that continues, it will lead to the obliteration of the Liberals. So this is a really intense power struggle. The issue here is who's going to dominate the future centre-right of Australian politics, a pretty important issue.
I mean, you know, the polls, as you say, Hanson's sitting around 30% primary, right? Can you imagine ever a situation, everyone's talking about this, whether she could ever be in government?
A lot of people, I think this is a really interesting point
because
here.
no one thought that Donald Trump could, Paul.
No,
the whole political establishment, the media said it'll never happen, and then it happened. He was shocked. Remember when he came out that night? He was white in the face. He didn't expect it.
Well, the point I'd make about a lot of the people supporting Pauline Hanson at the moment, they want Hanson in government. They don't care about the Liberal Party at all. I mean, if you're in the Liberal Party, your responsibility and obligation is to get in front of Hanson. But a lot of the people supporting Hanson aren't interested in the Liberal Party at all. Some of them have got this idea, let's just burn the place down, but others actually want to see Hanson in the executive government and governing. And that's why they keep promoting the idea, that the choice in this election is between a Labor government and a coalition One Nation arrangement. That's false. That is not the choice at all in this election. And to the extent people say that, they are creating a really false and misleading paradigm about where this country is.
I mean, these days, most people don't support a political party per se. They're not members of a political party. They just want a better country. They want a safe country, a country with a strong economy. And I think the verdict that many would make about the Albanese government is that it has been a failure when it comes to the economy and the property market, and it has been a failure when it comes to social cohesion, national security and counter-terrorism. So if people want a better country and she's got the highest primary vote, then what do?
Well, we'll see what happens when we get to the next election. But clearly, it's obvious the judgment that Anthony Albanese's made. And the judgment he has made is he will campaign saying the alternative to Labor is a three-way arrangement between One Nation, Liberals and Nationals. I mean, he's already made this very clear. This is the Labor campaign. The Labor campaign is that a vote for the Liberals is a vote for One Nation, a vote for One Nation is a vote for the Liberals.
Yep.
And Anthony Albanese is pretty confident that if that is the situation when he goes to the next election, then that campaign will keep Labor in office. And I think all the evidence points to that.
Pauline Hanson this week, she announced, did a big press conference to announce her Victorian team on Monday. But as part of that, she banned the ABC, The Guardian, and I think The Age from even covering it. Now, as I said on air the other night, I have my issues with those media outlets, but surely a critical part of democracy, Paul, is having the tough scrutiny.
The point about Hanson is a publicity generation machine, okay? So she's always got something contentious to say, and this is in many ways the secret of her success. So she's now got this this tie into the media. The media watches Hanson, Hanson watches the media. And so Hanson can now think, okay, well, if there are particular media groups, media organisations that aren't fair to me, I'll ban them. I'll ban them. Well, that'll work in the short term, but it won't work in the longer term. How many people is Hanson going to ban? The fact of the matter is, the longer this goes on, the more Hanson is the front runner in the polls, the more the media will scrutinise her. And you know something? She doesn't like it. She loves the publicity, but she's got a glass jaw. She hates
so many of them, Paul.
She hates being criticised.
Yeah.
She can't stand it. She gets very emotional when it comes to being criticised. And I'll tell you what, there'll be a lot more criticism to come.
Well, she hated the criticism from you, Paul. In fact, I think we've got a quick grab of what she had to say after one of your columns. Should we play it? Let's have a look.
Do you care what people like Kelly write about you?
Not at all. I tell you what, it's really getting to him, isn't it? This elitist attitude.
Yeah, so accusing you of being the elite there, an elitist attitude, Paul.
Well, all I'd say is this. I've been watching politics for a long period of time. And the one thing I know is Pauline Hanson is not equipped in any way, shape or form, particularly when it comes to policies, to have any say in the government of this country. And that's what I'll be saying pretty regularly from now on.
Paul Kelly, and I've got to mention your book because I was away when you launched it, but a huge congratulations on your book, The Twilight of Exceptionalism.
Thanks so much,
I hope
Sharri.
it's going well. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Good.
Thank you. All right, still to come, business leaders have come out in droves to accuse the Albanese government of creating a productivity crisis, and property owners have been warned the worst is still to come as they brace for more price slides. Now that's with a former Treasury insider after the break. Thanks for tuning in. Well, the Prime Minister's former economics advisor has ripped into Labor for its disastrous tax changes. Alex Sanchez revealed that he's tried to convince Albanese against the capital gains tax overhaul. Joining me now to discuss is former Treasury Assistant Secretary David Pearl. David, great to see you. Now, Alex is a good friend of yours, I assume from Treasury days. What did you make of his comments? Do you agree?
Good to be with you, Sharri. Alex is a friend of mine from the year I spent working as an advisor to Kevin Rudd in the early 2000s. We befriended each other then. We were the only two people in the operation, it seemed, even then, who thought that Labor's policy high point was achieved under the Hawke-Keating era. I went back to Treasury. I never joined the party, but Alex remained loyal. And I can say it pained him to make these public criticisms today, but I think the party's completely deserted economic rationalism.
So what is his main concern? Is it's about the capital gains tax specifically or all of the tax changes?
His concerns go way beyond the capital gains tax changes. As he said in his public comments, he urged ministers that the personal income tax rate should come down for the top to the 30s, which is the position that Paul Keating and Bill Kelty have adopted. He also wanted a more competitive corporate tax rate to attract international capital. He also, as you refer, had concerns with the capital gains tax hike. He recognises, like all economists and many intelligent people in the community, that if you overtax savings and investment, you kill growth and productivity and ultimately hurt living standards.
I mean, the other, picture of this is now we are seeing the tangible impact, the fact that house prices are falling. I mean, NAB has now revised down its house price forecasts, predicting they could drop by 10%. I mean, the falls in some areas are much greater than this. How far do you think this will go?
Look, Sharri, I think this media analysis in recent days is a bit hysterical. Just to put things in context, national house prices have declined by less than 2% from March. They're a lot higher than they were at the beginning of last year when the RBA started cutting the cash rate, and they're 50% higher than they were in 2020. I'm not minimising the distress that homeowners and investors experience when house prices dip a little bit. I don't think that there is any chance of a crash other than this one scenario. We have to get back to inflation. We still have an inflation crisis in this country. The media seems to have grown bored about that. That's why interest rates are rising, and that's why house prices are coming off a little bit. House prices falling is one of the ways that higher cash rates slow activity in the economy and bring down inflation. Now, if Jim Chalmers wasn't addicted to spending, we wouldn't have had to have had these cash rate increases. But the thing that really would hurt the housing market is the economy crashing. And the economy would crash if the RBA and the government do not get on top of inflation. Inflation expectations get out of control, and then interest rates have to rise far higher to put the genie back in the bottle. So that would crash the economy and the housing market. So I just think people need to put things in perspective and not forget that we haven't got on top of inflation yet.
No, that's so true. Look, and just in response to your comments about the property market, I mean, we have seen a lot of people worried that they're now in negative equity, particularly first home buyers. And, I had Tom Panos on the show last night, I think, and he said last weekend he went to many auctions, not a single bidder. No one even registered. So, I mean, this is the real effect that people are noticing on the ground. Very, very quickly before you go, Treasury's most senior tax official, Diane Brown, is stepping down. She oversaw this condemned tax policy overhaul. Do you think there's anything suspicious about this timing, or it's just time for her to retire?
It could be entirely innocent, but when somebody disappears from the Politburo in the Soviet Union, usually there's more to it. Rob Heffernan screwed up tax reform a few years ago. He was in Diane's position and he was kicked out. David Parker under the mining tax. So there is a bit of a tradition that when tax reform is not well received, the head of Revenue Group cops it. I'm not saying that happened in this case.
Yeah, all right. David Pearl, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Still to come, the Irish jet that can't land in fog because it pulled out its Israeli navigation system. It's after the break. And welcome back. We can reveal there's been a shocking incident at a Sydney high school where a toilet block has been vandalised with vile anti-Semitism, and it was found by a horrified student. This is at Hunters Hill High School, where a student had to alert the principal after finding this disgusting graffiti. We've had to blur some of it. It's too graphic to show, but it's clearly a stereotype depiction with racial slurs and Nazi symbols. Well, joining me now is Hunters Hill councillor Carol Tanoose-Sleeman, who's also Vice President of the New South Wales Liberal Party and the Liberal Women's Council New South Wales President. Great to see you. You've been dealing with the principal on this. What's happened here?
Look, in short, the matter was raised to the school's attention by the parents of this young teenager. The school has stepped in, responded as quickly as possible, and has taken the steps across the process to ensure that the graffiti's been removed, that the teenager is doing well, and more importantly, that an investigation is underway.
And they had to block off the whole toilet block, is that right?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They've had to block it off, and police have been involved. and they are currently investigating it at the moment.
Now this is an area that you've done a lot of work on.
Yes.
The issue of anti-Semitism in the community. Are you seeing a lot in the Hunter Seal area?
Look, no, we're we're a very small suburb, but a very proud suburb. We've got about 3% of our population is Jewish, but we have a wonderful, wonderful Montessori nursing home. We've been more pragmatic. This is not an isolated event at Hunters Hill High School. There have been previous reports under former leadership. We also had an incident a year ago outside the office of the Honourable Anthony Roberts that triggered us designing and implementing an anti-Semitic strategy and a framework which was implemented this
And it's amazing
year.
you've shown the leadership on it. I want to turn to this story before you go out of Ireland, where the Irish government bought a $53 million Eurojet, but because they'd removed its Israeli-made navigation system, it now reportedly can't land in fog. Now, this is all because they've, Ireland, Carol, they blacklisted Israeli technology in protest.
Well, look, I've got a lot of Irish friends, and I can proudly tell you that a lot of them do support not only the Jewish community, but certainly Israel. And what I would say about, unfortunately, Ireland's certainly on the wrong side of history.
The government, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, serves them right if they've pulled out the Israeli navigation system and now they can't land in fog.
No, they can't.
Hilarious story.
Be careful who you mess with.
No, exactly. Well, good to have you on the show, Carol.
Thank you so much,
And I'm sure we'll have you back at another point to talk about local issues. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for your time tonight. We'll see you at 8 o'clock, as always, tomorrow night. And right now, Paul Murray in the Man Cave.